Welcome to Out is Through, a podcast about living a meaningful life in difficult times. I'm Larry Lariosa, and I'm a life coach and licensed marriage and family therapist. In these uncertain times, maintaining a sense of well-being and purpose feels more challenging, yet more important than ever. In this podcast, I'll feature guests who have used their life experience, passion, and creativity to find personal meaning and deeper connection. As the saying goes, the only way out is through. And I hope these conversations help inspire you to live life to its fullest. So thanks for tuning in and enjoy the episode. Welcome to another episode of Out is Through, a podcast about living a meaningful life in difficult times. My name is Larry Lariosa, your host, and I'm looking forward to being in conversation today with our guest, who is truly an artist in every sense of the word. Christian Linaban is a pioneer of Cebuano Cinema New Wave through his production company, Panumduman Pictures, and acclaimed short films. He won the Ishmael Bernal Award for Young Cinema at 2010's Cinemanila International Film Festival and 2011 Gawad Urian Best Cinematography Award. He's directed 2 feature films, Aberya and SUPERPSYCHOCEBU. He's also a prolific musician and songwriter. I want to welcome to Out is Through, Christian.
Hello. Hello, everybody. Hi, Larry. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, welcome to Out is Through. I'm glad to have you on the podcast. Christian is a friend, but I'm also a fan of his work, and we're going to talk about his work and his journey as a creative person today. But before I get started, I'm asking all of my guests this question. There's a lot happening in the world. So how are you doing? How are you doing in these times?
That's a tough question. I'm a basketball fan, and shout out to the NBA fans out there. Like Klay Thompson, formerly from the Warriors, was asked, because his team is not in the playoffs right now, and somebody asked him, did you regret your decision to move? And he was like, don't do that to me, because so that's how I feel right now. Like, you asking me that question, like, Larry, don't do that to me, Larry.
Yeah. I think we're all kind of figuring out how to make sense of everything. And
also, when they have you like scared, and panicking, that's exactly how, they want you to be. I feel like we need to regulate too, just to be functional.
You're so right about regulation. We can't be in it all the time. We've got to just take a deep breath and cope and lean into it when we need to, but give ourselves permission to lean out of it when we need to. With that said, why don't we talk about your creative journey? How you got to be the filmmaker, cinematographer, musician that you are?
So I was born and raised in Cebu City in the Philippines. I lived my first 3 decades there. I still think that I'm a Cebuano by heart. You can't take that away from me. And I'm also a filmmaker, which might surprise some people because Cebu doesn't really have like a thriving film industry. Me and some of my colleagues, we went against that and tried making Cebuano films, films that were made in Bisaya. I've always been a fan of the medium. I was raised by a single mom, so I grew up in front with the TV, so I've watched a lot. And my grandfather was also a big cinema fan. He brought me to his favorite action films. I watched a lot of Van Damme and Steven Seagal films with him, Stallone, in the 80s. And that started my affinity for watching movies. I just loved watching them. And as I grew older, in college especially, I saw like a David Lynch movie, and it opened my mind to all the other possibilities that you can do with the medium. And in college, we had a TV arts class. And that was the first time I actually tried making videos for movies. I found that it was very enjoyable and very natural to me, since I already had that precursor of all the training of that media exposure. I felt like it just came natural to me. So I also started shooting films, like literal film photographs. Started in that medium actually. I was a film photographer first. And then when I moved to making movies, it was already digital. And I was like, it was so much more convenient to what I was used to shooting in film. And so I bought my own camera and just started shooting shorts, which are some of them you've seen. And from then on, the shorts got recognition until we got a chance to make features, and we got to make a lot of features in the span of a decade.
You said earlier that Cebu doesn't really have a thriving film industry. Can you say more about that?
Actually, Cebu has a very rich history of movies, but it's weird because it's by phase, and sometimes it skips decades. Like in the 1950s, there was supposedly a golden age of filmmaking in Cebu, and then in the 60s it disappeared, and then in the 70s it came back with a vengeance. There were a lot of productions made in the 70s. In the 80s it disappeared, and then it only resurfaced back in the late 2009, and we were part of that movement in the late 2000s, 2010s especially. I was a cinephile, but then I'm exposed to all these movies, and none of them are about my neighbors or this language that I spoke in. So I felt like there was like a hole in my, as a cinephile, there was a hole there that needs to be filled in a way. So we tried to contribute to that.
As an American, when I think of films in the Philippines, I think of films from Manila where there's pretty thriving film scene. And I think of almost a more Hollywood film industry. But when I think of Cebuano films, and I've been exposed to more and more lately, I think of artsy, I think of underground. Is that accurate?
I guess because we didn't have an industry, and if you're gonna do it, it was because you needed to do it for the sake of it. I just found like-minded people who were obsessed with the craft, who just wanted to make films for the sake of making film, for expression. Because if we're gonna make it to for to sell it to Star Cinema or we don't have access to distribution. So for us, we just wanted to make movies that were about ourselves. I think that was just the initial impetus of wanting to do them. So yeah, I guess in a way we are more artsy because we don't know our predecessors because they're generations away. There's a disconnect. It's like we also raised ourselves. We shot for whatever standards we had in our head. An example of that is like the first feature I shot was like a one long take film, like without cuts. And who would do that for a first time film, And we were actually the second film to ever to do that in history. The last one was called Russian Ark. So yeah, because like I said, we didn't have any predecessors, so we just shot for the stars and went for broke, basically. Some people say there must be something in the water in Cebu.
Christian refers to an area in the Philippines he calls the Mystic Triangle, composed of the islands of Cebu, Bohol, and Siquijor. The area is called that because of its history of mysticism, magic, and spirituality. I visited the Mystic Triangle on a trip in 2020, and I definitely felt that energy when I was there. A mix of beauty, danger, and maybe a little connection to my ancestors and the supernatural. So I've seen a handful of your films. I saw one of the features, SUPERPSYCHOCEBU, and I've seen a handful of your shorts, and they kind of have this haunting yet spiritual quality. The use of music is really prominent and evocative. There's a disturbing element to it, but there's also a beauty to it. Can you say more about how growing up in the Mystic Triangle may have informed that style of storytelling and filmmaking for you?
Yeah, being in the Mystic Triangle, like I always say, is like everybody is unanimously superstitious. Even the skeptics sort of like have one corner of superstition that they have. So yeah, I grew up in that kind of mentality, and there's a reason why that is. Even in terms of Catholicism or Christianity, it started in Cebu. Like the first Catholic church or Catholic occupation was actually in Cebu first, and before the rest of the country. So and yeah, we're known for our witches. There's a word, another word for a sorcerer is binisaya, which is actually, it also means like our language. Bisaya is when you speak Bisaya, you're nagbinisaya ka. But strangely enough, that's also what we call our shamans. So it's sort of part of that identity. So it's fascinating. I guess for me, like, if you look at the Philippines in the map, it looks very magical. It looks so different. It feels like somebody made a doodle of something. Yeah, I think it's a very magical place, and you feel it. And having grown there and having not been there for a while, I think it confirms more how there's a certain energy charge in that island. Cebu has a lot of limestone in it. They say limestone is it's a conductor, a spiritual conductor, they say. Yeah, so I am a product of that environment, so it just comes out.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we are a predominantly Catholic country, but our indigenous pre colonial practices were mostly animistic, or what a lot of people consider supernatural or spiritual.
I was really interested in occultism at such a young age. Like, I think it was in high school I started dabbling in Wicca and tarot. And at the time, I didn't tell anybody because that was the time that if you did that stuff, you were labeled like satanic. The early 90s still felt like the effects of the satanic panic in the 80s. It was still there. I remember the Catholic high school that I used to go to. They showed this documentary called Hell's Bells, and the documentary is basically about how Satan is in every music. Like they tried to backmask like Led Zeppelin song, and they say, oh look, they're praising Satan, and they try to interpret the lyrics as that. And even like Whitney Houston, because she was promoting sex in her songs, which was so
What?
preposterous.
Jeez.
But anyway, that was the level of like satanic panic in that high school. And I remember like being interested in all this dark stuff, this occult stuff, and having to hide them, even from my friends.
Yeah, it's this weird tension between our Catholic influences and this animistic pre colonial past. And then you've got this hybrid of messaging we get around it.
And I have a very gothic taste. Even my music is very goth, so it appears in my films as well. And you mentioned music in those films, and it's largely because film is kind of an extension of my music. I always say that film and music is more similar than film and literature because of the element of time. It's a progression of emotions. So the way you make a song or an album, it's the same as you make a film. There has to be like an emotional arc that you have to jump through. So I see it that way, especially like watching more abstract films, like films from David Lynch. I saw Mulholland Drive, and it changed my way of thinking about movies because I didn't understand a thing about that movie. But how come I feel all these emotions? And hence these emotions make me think about it more. For me, like, the best movie is a week or two later, you're still thinking about it. That's what I try to charge my films with, is like the emotional resonance that keeps you feeling and thinking.
Time for a break, but we'll return to our interview with Christian Linaban. were listening to the music of Christian Linaban under the name Titan. And now, let's return to the conversation. Yes, your films do not stop playing in my head after I see them. I'm not going to try to pronounce the name of the film because I don't want to put people through my poor Cebuano, but Olivia, that film, and just the disturbing nature of that storyline, which we won't give it away for the audience, but you do such a wonderful job portraying quote unquote ordinary character like Olivia and turn it upside down and show the complexity of her longing and her, I want to say repression, this repression that maybe she is relegated to in the outside world that turned violent.
When you think about it, Olivia is really an extension of the song. I mean, the yearning of that song sort of turned into that film. You know, that feeling of like needing somebody, you know, like just needing somebody really bad. And everybody can relate to that. Somebody has gone through that emotion, you know, of just like wanting somebody just so bad, or not somebody, even something, you know, and that it turns you violent sometimes. And it's a thin line.
Yeah. So how have audiences responded to your films and your style of filmmaking?
I don't know. Because like compared to my other work, Super Psycho Cebu is the most exposed film by a very wide margin. Like a lot of people have seen that more than my shorts, more than my first feature especially. So I really get more feedback for that film more than my shorts. I have 4 shorts, but they're really more like ambitious ones was Ang Gugma ni Olivia and Doctora. I don't know if have you seen Doctora?
I have. I just finished it. Yeah. Similar themes that I referenced before. And I'll be thinking about it tonight while I'm trying to go to bed.
Yeah, I was gonna ask what you thought of it, but maybe you should leave that for next week.
Gotta let it process.
Yeah.
What has the reception been to Super Psycho Cebu? And maybe you can give my listeners a quick synopsis of it without giving away the plot.
Super Psycho Cebu is about this college kid, this stoner kid, who discovers like a roach, which is like the sort of the edge of a joint, you know, when it's almost done. He finds it under the door of his roommate and smokes it, and it happens to be very potent. So that leads him to go on a quest to score some more of it. And that particular weed is called Super Psycho Cebu, which is like, because the slang in Cebu for our cannabis is Psycho Cebu, because it can make you a bit paranoid, but it's also a good music trip, you know, which is and I think that just makes you more sensitive. But then I made this fictional strain called the Super Psycho Cebu, which is like nourished by guano by bat shit. So, and the whole implication there is like whoever smokes it also becomes batshit crazy. But then, are they really, you know? So he basically goes on a quest to get some Super Psycho Cebu, but along the way he meets all these characters that have tried it and their lives have been changed. And it's also a way of showing how psychedelics can actually help you too. You know, help you spiritually, help you see things that you normally don't see.
Yeah, I know that Super Psycho Cebu often gets that label of being a stoner film, and nothing against stoner films, but for me, it really takes away from its depth and its expansiveness as a film. I found the film extremely relatable as somebody who grew up here, but also holds a lot of those contradictions around identity and faith and spirituality, and this complex history of colonialism and what is ours and what is not ours, and what have we adapted to make ours, and what do we think is ours, and what do we want, that I really saw in this film. I'm a therapist, so I watch films through the lens of psychology, and I found the film deeply psychological and emotional. and how the main character, this kind of ordinary kid, once he's able to be out of his thinking brain and into his more unconscious brain through the use of psychedelics, it unleashed all the contradictions that come with being Filipino, and the religious component and the spiritual component and the colonial component and the identity stuff and all of this conflict that I think many of us in the diaspora hold. And I just appreciated you putting that together, and I was on the journey with him. I was for it. I hold those conflicts.
Thank you for that, Larry. It really is quite deceiving because I say stoner film, but when you watch it, it's all those things that you've described. And and for me, like the type of artist or filmmaker I am, I kind of want to lure people, you know, because if I go full art house, people are not going to gonna show up, you know. Like so, I have to be like entertaining and but find a way to give you the message. And my favorite term is like it's a Trojan horse, you know. Like, hey, it's a stoner film, watch it. And then when you go there, it's literally like this spell of you going through this person's like experience, you know, like of awakening per se. So so yeah, there have been two reactions to that. One of them is like, yeah, that was one hell of a ride, you know. And there's another camp who like preferred to watch like their expectations. There's this one review who said like I should watch Pineapple Express to know what a real stoner film is, you know, and but then you know like I said, like some people wouldn't appreciate Trojan Horse. You know, I came here to watch like what I expected, but then to me it's still a win because not you've seen my movie. That's going to be in your head whether you like it or not. You've seen it, and all those things I wrote, all those things that we made, it's going to be there. You know, it's permanent in your head. So for me, like I actually sometimes I blush when I see a hate review. You know, like somebody who just sat down and was seething with anger and tried to, you know, destroy my movie. That's still the same for me as a glowing review. Because for me, like the point is to like shake you up emotionally, whether you like it or not. Because for me, the worst thing you could do as an artist is to have your art out and people are like, yeah, it's okay, meh, you know. For me, success for me is either like you're applauding it or you're booing it. It's divisive, but like it's the way I like it. I think if for a person to say like, oh, it's meh, you know, like that probably hurts me more.
Because that's what art is. It causes us to react, and a lack of reaction means it could have been a commercial in between a game. There's something about, even if it's a negative reaction, it's stuck in someone's mind. And I could see that film being very evocative.
In fact, there's like a meme going around like, oh, Super Psycho Cebu again. Like, is there no other film showing? Well, which is fair, you know, it's fair because, but for me, like, it's really sad because, like, is there no other film like showing all the time? So actually, this year we didn't show in Cebu because, like, people will be like, oh, that film again, you know, which is great. Like, that's for me. That for me is success, you know, like people that are sick of my movie. I've done my job, you know.
Well, yeah, that's a good segue into this next question. But because this podcast is about finding meaning in one's life, how has your art, your films given you a sense of meaning or belonging or connection with others?
I think by nature of the medium, it's especially if you watch it in a big screen together, it is very communal. Like I just watched Sinners, and I won't spoil it. I saw it in Oakland in 70 millimeters, and it was packed, and the director was there. And there was a moment by the end of the film, like something happened, and everybody just cheered and clapped their hands, and that was such a good feeling, you know. Like it felt like a community, like it felt like a community being addressed, you know. And they were like, "Whoo, that's us," you know. Like we would do that, and you can never see that watching Netflix. You can never feel that watching Netflix. So movies by nature, if you watch it together, is very communal, and that builds. For me, that contributes to the community.
Yeah, and it seems like you've really turned around the scene, not just in Cebu. Obviously, your films have made an impact there, but it seems like your films are getting more exposure here. And I know that there's been people in our community that have really been impacted by your work. And I think that's ultimately what meaning is, right? We have an idea, we have something we want to give to the world, whether that be a story, whether that even be a story that sticks in their head, but something of yours, of your creation that is shared with a greater community. And I always think if people see a little part of themselves in our work, that is, for an artist, that is everything. That is the gold that we so crave, because it's, you know, it's a lonely process a lot of times. And I imagine all of your films started out in your head, and to have them viewed by other people and have people impacted by them, I would imagine feels really good.
Yeah, that is very good. That's the process of art. It's not just film. Like even a painting that just came from your head. It's a rabbit out of a hat because you have no raw materials when you make a song. It's just all from your head. And then the moment it's released, it's published, it's not yours anymore. You know, it belongs to the world and they can do whatever they want with it, which is fine. Because for me, it's really more about the process. Like I do things I'm not very result based. Like I do things because I'm compelled to do it, and I feel like there's some healing to like involved in the process, or there's something I need to address in my life, and it's throughout the process. So when I'm done with it, it's like okay, so that's what came out of it. But I already had, I had what I needed from it, which was the process, and now the ending is for everybody. There's no perfect movie. Some people don't like The Godfather. There's always a bad review, and there's always a very glowing review for even for the worst films. There's always one person who would say like, I like it, So I'm not really concerned with that. Like I just try to make the best film I could make, or best song, or whatever I'm doing in the moment. It's for me, like Steven Spielberg said, I always think about the audience because I am the audience. And this is the guy who made a lot of blockbusters, in his career. So he's just thinking of himself.
Do you have any advice for listeners who may have ideas about pursuing meaning through a passion project like a film, but may be stuck in their creative process?
I would say there is power in doing something for the sake of it, just because you just can't help but do it. And you don't have to rationalize, you just do it for the sake, even if it's so preposterous or like hopeless, if you're compelled to do it, then you should do it, because having a desire to do something, there's something supernatural about that, because you can't choose that. It's literally a calling, and it's not a calling if it's not crazy. So I think there's a power in having to do things for the sake of it. And just having to do something for the sake of it is doing it for your soul, feeding your soul. Find a way to survive, but don't ignore that. Don't ignore the spiritual aspect of making art.
I absolutely love that answer, because art is such a spiritual practice. How can people find more about your work?
It's interesting. I used to have all the short films I produced under Panumduman Pictures in my YouTube channel, but I took them all out because you mentioned before that you don't put your film online because you like the communal aspect of it, and that's actually me trying to get my power back from from YouTube. It's like, no, I'm not gonna put it in your platform. This is mine, and I'm gonna find a way to like show it to people, a group of people who are physically present. So yeah, right now nothing's online, and even in Super Psycho, we have a lot of people asking like, where can I stream the movie? And for me, I think I want to save it for physical screenings, and we've been doing that. I think there's power in that because a lot of things are readily available online, but like if there's scarcity, I think I want to try that route. you know.
I love that. I mean, that's exactly why I do it. This is our life work, and I think we got to preserve it. And there is something about, as you said, some of the magic and some of the meaning is actually screening with other people or having an audience screen it, and we don't get that when it's on YouTube.
Yeah. And because of the industry of movies, there's this misconception that you have to watch a movie and when it comes out in the first few months, you're pressured because of capitalism. You're pressured that if it's not a new movie, it doesn't really matter, which is preposterous because once you make a movie, that's there forever. And that can always be new. It's always new to people who haven't seen it. And there's no rush, you know? Like, and especially there's the model of like film festivals is you have a two-year deadline to show your films around. And after that, it's considered an old film, you know? And that's weird because that's a film is forever, you know? If it's good, it's going to be good forever. Or if it's, you know, if it's lousy, nobody's going to watch it forever. So,
Yeah, yeah. I have one last question before I send you off to basketball and watching the game. Let's imagine you are stranded on a deserted island and you only have 3 albums that you are going to listen to for the rest of your life. What 3 albums would you pick?
yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that. Well, one of them is Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness.
Smashing Pumpkins. Yeah, such a great album.
In fact, I bought tickets to the opera because he's doing it's going to be reinterpreted. The album's going to be reinterpreted as an opera in Chicago, and it's going to be late November. And I already bought tickets for it. That's how much I love that album. What that says about the album, that it can be an opera, just says a lot about what the album is. It's supposed to be like a grunge band, and like 20, 30 years later it's turned into an opera, so it's really ahead of its time because at the time I heard it in the mid 90s, you know, I was used to grunge, you know, the whole well, you listen to the song and you can see the band, you can see all these long haired people from Seattle. But when I listened to the Pumpkins, like I thought of fairies, I thought of like vampires, you know, it wasn't the band I was thinking. It's like this music is very, you know, very cinematic and
Hauntingly beautiful, the way I described your films. Yeah.
hauntingly beautiful, yeah. And yet made by a rock band by 4 people with drums, bass, guitar, and sometimes he plays the piano. And it's a double album, but every song is different. One track is screaming, and the next track is just him and a lonely guitar. There's like a jazz song, and the next song is kind of like another rock song. And like I said, I have a gothic sensibility, and that's the Pumpkins are very gothic. Another would probably be Mare de Noms by A Perfect Circle. Have you heard of that band?
I have.
Yeah. Yeah, that first album is magic to me.
When did
Yeah.
that come out?
That's like early 2000s. I used to read a lot of Anne Rice at the time, and then that's when the album came out, and they were like the soundtrack of my Anne Rice experience. So it's very like sensual and dark and black and red, and plus it was made in the guitarist garage, so it has like a lo-fi sound to it, which for me helps. You know, like it's very dark. And my third one, I would probably bring this record I'm working on now, so I have a reminder that I participated in making music. So yeah, maybe that one, like my own EP that I'm trying to finish right now, I'll probably take that. So at least, you know, I have proof.
Yeah, I like that you said that because as a songwriter as well, I think, I mean, we're biased. Our music is we're listening to it from a different place, right? Than just we're listening to it with our creative selves in our hearts and our. I mean, why not hear that for the rest of your life when you're happy with it and you're proud of it?
Yeah, being a musician is very repetitive. You always like do it and over again. And for you to endure that, you have to like what you're doing, you know.
Well, all great choices. And thank you so much, Christian, for being part of this podcast. I am really happy that we got a chance to interview you and talk to you about your films. And yeah, I'm excited to see what comes next.
Great. Thanks for having me, Larry.
To find out more about Christian's film and music projects, see the links posted in the description box for this episode. I have such appreciation of Christian as an artist, and as I said earlier, he really defines that identity in every sense of the word. I found it fascinating to hear about his upbringing in the Mystic Triangle and how that informed his point of view. I think creating meaning in difficult times requires us to be raw, risky, and passionate, and Christian is a great example of someone who bravely pushes that envelope, going to those dark, emotionally uncomfortable places that we often don't give ourselves access to. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time. The views expressed by the speakers are their own, and their appearance on the podcast does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Out is Through is a podcast for entertainment and educational purposes only. It's not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you are in need of support, please seek out a licensed mental health professional in your area.